computer, and then I say share. And now we can do it again. And then I put the folks, the faces up here. Okay, so the purpose of this webinar is to introduce or answer questions about our Certified Scrum Master course and about our Agile Release Planning workshop. We really recommend doing them both in the same, contiguously, both in the same week, perhaps in three days in a row, perhaps 5 days, sort of half days mostly across the week. But in any case, together, people don't have to do that, but we recommend that. That's why we're talking about them both at the same time. Next week, I'm going to spend a whole session just talking about the Agile Release Planning workshop, because that's particularly because that's unusual. Nobody else does it. But anyway, I'm recommending that you do both. Okay, so about both of these, the Certified Scrum Master course and the Agile Release. So we're going to go over some basics fairly quickly. I hope I don't talk too fast because I want to leave time for your questions. And I'm trying to keep it within roughly a 30-minute time box. Okay, so about the CSM course, or Certified Scrum Master course. So I guess the first thing I want to say is that that we're unique. Our approach is unique, and we're unique in other ways. So one of the things is that that we, or particularly I, have been co-trained with Jeff Sullivan's 8 different times. And I think that's very rare. There are a few people that could say something like that, or even more, but very few, like a handful. Some of you may know Jeff Sullivan is one of the co-creators of Scrum. So he's one of the 2 people that wrote the Scrum Guide. The other gentleman that wrote the Scrum Guide is called Ken Schwaber. I originally took his course back in 2005. It's also unique that I have an MBA. A lot of the folks that are teachers do not have an MBA. And don't have that sort of mindset and don't look at Scrum that way. And I think that helps. Of course, I may be biased. I'm the only one who teaches Agile Release Planning per se. Other people, Jeff Sullivan, for example, teaches almost all the same ideas. He just doesn't call it Agile Release Planning. And I add a few things. I've got business value points in there that not everybody has. So I don't think Jeff Sullivan, at least in the Scrum Master course, talks about business value points. Other people do. Henrik Myberg does, and some others, but I'm sort of unique in that way. So it's a semi-unique thing. I don't want to make it completely unique, but nobody else has the workshop. I do include the Agile Release Planning ideas and an exercise in the course, but the workshop is a separate thing afterwards. We'll talk about that in a minute. So as I say, almost every time I do this Scrum Master course, I do the Agile Release Planning workshop that same week. I'm not, many of the trainers are former coders and testers prior in their background. I've got 20 years plus experience with coders and testers working in teams, but I'm not, I did a little bit of testing, I did a little bit of coding, but I would never have called myself for any length of time a coder or a tester. So I have what I think of as more a business point of view about what Scrum is. Okay, so a few basics. I like to cover the basics. For example, the values and the principles, not just the Scrum values, but the values and principles more widely. Somebody, we're getting a little feedback from somebody, so you might want to put yourself on mute. Yeah, maybe that was Angel. So we talk about the values and the principles, and oops, that's a typo. We talk about the roles, the events, used to be called meetings, and the artifacts. So those are pretty basic things, but we go into them, each one of them, in some depth. We also talk about more advanced topics that do vary from course to course. It depends on the needs of the participants and so forth. And also it depends on how much time is allowed. People often want to talk about the very basic stuff. Even people with quite a lot of experience want to review some of the basics and understand why I'm recommending specific things about certain roles or whatever it may be. It's also a little bit unique that I talk about lean. I don't do it quite as much as I used to, but I do often put Agile Scrum in the context of lean ideas, lean thinking, lean principles, and so forth. Okay, some approaches about how I do the course. And I think that there are many, so I made a little list here. I like to make it personal. I like to make it, conversational, back and forth, interactive in that way, question and answer, you might say. Definitely like to do exercises. I like to have a couple of chuckles along the way and make it humorous. I try to be in many cases very straightforward, but also I'm a little bit sarcastic sometimes. I hope not for anybody's sake in any kind of way that bothers them, but still it's my nature to be a little bit sarcastic, but hopefully mostly that's for fun. I think people do feel like they're always on their toes. They never know when I'm about to ask them a question. I try not to put anybody on the spot, but I do like to ask a lot of questions and see what they already know or what they think the answer is, and then maybe respond to that. So in all these different ways, I like to make it fun. Fun is fun. One of the Jeff Solon quotes I talk about is in terms of Scrum, fun is essential. I also like to talk about what Jeff Solon calls aggressive Scrum, and I guess I'll call it that too. So we want to be successful. And I think that includes, as I was just talking about, more fun, but particularly more velocity, notably more productivity, but also fun, and also more business value, which is somewhat harder to measure than velocity, higher quality as well, a sense of greater pride in our work, and then making other people's lives better. So all those things by going after it and really trying to help the team become a lot better than where they were before. So I just wanted to talk about these, well, maybe 2 or 3, you could argue. So one is that I want you to understand the basics, but also to get a feeling for what it's like to be in a team. So a lot of the remarks, at least the way I think of them these days, are about helping you get a feeling for what it's going to be like, or what it would be like to be in a really good team. And we want you to have the attitude that you want to do it. So I'm trying to help you maybe with your own motivation, or the student with their own motivation, and then with the Scrum Master to help the team with their motivation. And I guess I want to say that, it's a team sport, and Scrum is not everybody's cup of tea. So if people look at it and learn about it and then say, I don't like teams that much, that's fine too. And they may run into people that say, I'm not that much into teams. I think that people should not be forced into working in a team. Everybody that's in the team should want to be there. So that's just a little side note about the attitudes. Okay, at least 2 formats I want to talk about. So it takes about 16 hours, one way or the other. One format is 4 hours, and then 8 hours, half full. And then the other format is 2 days, the whole day, so to speak, full time. So 8 and some 8.5 hours, maybe in 2 days, with a break for lunch and all that kind of stuff. I also give the course in 2 formats, or certainly have given the course in 2 formats. In person, as we had to do always before, and then now, of course, we have COVID. So we're doing all the courses now online, although I do have one course right now that's available that would be in person. I'm a little bit concerned that we're going to get enough people to sign up for it right now. It's in early November. We're going to keep people 10 feet apart and do a bunch of other things. I'll mention them a little bit later, not the full list, but a few things. So I think it would be quite safe, but I'm not sure that people are quite ready for it. I certainly hope that we go back to in-person later. I'm really happy with the online course. I have to tell you, I'm far happier with it than I expected to be. But I do think in-person is better. So hopefully sometime in 2021, we're back to that pretty consistently. We'll see. That's what I hope for everybody, really, for everybody's sake. Then I wanted to say two types in a different way, that we have both public courses and in-house courses. So you might have a group of people. I do in-house courses quite often. Say 10 people from your own organization that are maybe parts of 2 teams or 1 team plus some other people. And we could do an in-house course, quote unquote in-house. These days, we would do an in-house course still online, at least typically, which I've done a bunch of over the several months now that we've been dealing with COVID. Then the CSM test. There's always questions about the CSM test. So here are a few basics that you may have heard about before, and you may have questions. So it's online. We do it after the course. It's at your convenience. You have roughly 3 months to do it, which I would not wait for. It'll take about an hour. There are 50 questions. You're picking 4 possible answers. It's multiple choice, 4 possible answers. One of them, obviously, well, there's only one answer that's correct out of the 4, is the way that they organize it. They may have 1 or 2 questions where it's, A, B, C, and then D is all the above. They may have 1 or 2 of those, in case that's your question. I have gotten that question before. Anyway, you pick one of the 4, and you've got, as I say, about an hour, so a little bit more than 1 minute per item to do it. I think it's quite doable in that period of time. Both the questions and the answers are fairly short, which is sometimes confusing because it doesn't fully explain. And pretty much everyone passes the test. I'm not sure that everyone passes the test the first time, although I've actually not heard back from anybody who did not, at least of my students, who did not pass the test. But I see some data that suggests, both generally and for my students, that a couple people did not pass the test. There's also a group of people that don't take the test for whatever reason. Sometimes they get really busy or something. So it's a little bit of an asterisk there, but pretty much everybody passes the test. Okay, so I include the Agile Release Planning. It's kind of my name for what I think of as a set of basic ideas and practices, as I say there. I think of it mainly as adaptive planning and all the different things that are part of that. The idea that we revise the plan continuously as we get smarter, and we actively try to get smarter. And the assumption is we're always, excuse me, with my noise, we're always missing some things, a lot of information actually up front. So we're trying to pull that information in so that we can then make the plan better. And I do think, in this next to last bullet point, that the planning is more important than the plan. The idea is the plan's always going to be revised as we get smarter. And then I do emphasize, at least for the customers particularly, and also often for the business and for others, as you all do this stuff, you know what I mean. The date is actually important. So being blasé, as some Agile people want to be, about the date and whether or not we're going to make the date is not particularly my recommendation. But equally, being overly confident that we know that we're going to make the date, I think is also sort of a foolish approach. Stuff happens, as we say. So anyway, that gives you a couple of ideas about that. Now, here's some things that we cover, some little, you might call them topics. So we talk about the vision, we talk about the users, we talk about and actually do build out user stories. We talk about the drivers overall, the 3 to 5 drivers overall for why we're doing the project, which often leads into motivation or supports the motivation, you might say. We talk about business value points. We talk about, story points. Sorry, little typo there. We talk about story points, ROI, the ratio between business value points and story points. We also talk about other factors that could change the ordering. So it's going to be ordered mainly by ROI, but other factors will affect the ordering. Then we talk about using velocity to then do these things on the next page, lay out the stories into the sprints. We talk about contingency, that you must have some. I talk about a thing that I call the landing strip, that final putting everything together and doing all the final testing and anything else and then shipping it. We talk about how do you set the date, and I've kind of already given it away with those things I've already said. We talk about the iterative or ever recurring product backlog refinement, where we're always revising the plan and improving the plan. And then we're talking about changing the culture. Almost always your culture, consciously or unconsciously, is used to these waterfall ideas about planning. And to me, I'm giving you ideas about how do we change that culture, maybe not instantaneously, but over time, we want to change that culture. So anyway, we cover those things in the course itself. And then we also recommend, not everybody does it, you don't have to do it, but we recommend the ARP Workshop. Okay, how is that different? And then how are we doing for time here? We're doing pretty well. So this is a 8-hour workshop. So we could do it in 2 half days, 4 hours and 4 hours on, say, a Thursday and a Friday, or 1 full day, often a Thursday, but not necessarily. And we take real work from one group of people, one person in the team. So if there's, for example, 8 people in the workshop, we'd have 2 teams. So one person out of each team, maybe more than one, proposes work, but one person out of each team is chosen, their work is chosen, roughly 6 months in size. And then the participants in that team, that table, that breakout group on Zoom, work with that work and create the agile release plan for that work. So that's the idea. So it's very hands-on that way, very realistic that way. And we propose that the person who knows the work the best, who's coming from that situation, act as the product owner. They're often not the product owner, but that's okay. They just act as the product owner because they know the work the best. So that's the basic idea of it. You already saw a lot of the content. So the ideal is that there's more than one team in the room. Sometimes we only have 4 people, but ideally we have more than one team. So the idea is that the 2 different tables, the 2 different teams, quote unquote teams, not necessarily real teams, but the 2 different teams in the workshop learn from each other. They see how the different groups do things very similarly, but also notably differently. And so they get to learn from each other, which is a nice thing, I think. Okay, a couple of further comments. So you become very active with your team, quite busy actually doing the work of agile release planning. But there's also a good amount of time where you can ask questions, and specifically ask questions about, well, how do I get my team to do this? How do I get my team to do this? How do I get my team to do this? It's always a concern, right? So a lot of it will be talking about, well, how do we convince other people to do this new thing that they have never done before? Okay, so attendees that come to the workshop say that it should be required. They say it's essential. They say this is when everything came together for me. And they love the learning by doing, as some of you know. And so the attendees strongly recommend this, but it's not required to get your CSM certification. I give you my own certification on agile release planning, but to get the CSM certification from Scrum Alliance, you don't have to take the workshop. Now, in terms of passing the test in the real world, that is to say, really doing Scrum well in the real world with your folks, I think I agree with the attendees that it really is essential to be a lot more proficient. But it's optional, and you don't have to take it right after the CSM. So if you can only take, say, 2 days off in a week, then you could come back 2 weeks later or whatever, some number of weeks later, and take the agile release planning workshop. That's fine too. Again, we do both of these in-house. So I just wanted to mention that again. And that can be very effective, particularly the first time in terms of getting them to adopt it. Make it an in-house workshop, either done remotely or in person, can help them sort of do it the first time without asking so many questions. And then once they've done it, they go like, oh, this is, I kind of, once they've done it, they go like, now I see what you're talking about. Now this all makes sense. Whereas if you try to convince them yourself, you're often, they often pester you endlessly with another question, another question, another question. Okay, so here's some links to the schedule of courses and workshops. It's also a link there to the next course, which has more details. Every time we list a course, you can go to that course and you'll see a lot more details about the course. There's also a write-up about the courses and the workshops on this page, as you can, I hope you can see my cursor. Okay, I just want to say a couple of words about the online. So these days, every course and workshop is online, except for one. So we got one in early November, November 4th, 4th, 5th, 6th. And that one's in person. I'm not sure if we're going to get enough people to sign up. I'm not sure if people feel that safe yet. But I think it's between the hotel and our ideas, keeping people 10 feet apart, I think it would be quite safe. But it's not up to me. It's up to the people that want to come. We do, for the online, we do recommend the half-day format somewhat. I mean, we understand that some people like to do it in 2 or 3 days consecutively and just take those days off. But it is tiring. It is tough to be on Zoom for your brain. That's what the researchers say, who understand this far better than I do. But it seems right to me from my experiences. I think it is hard. So therefore, I think you learn better in the half-day format. So we do kind of recommend that, but we do the full day format also every now and again. I'm going to say, roughly we do 1 full day week, 3 full days in a row, and then 3 weeks where we do half days. Okay, about the online. So we use Zoom. We use the breakout rooms in Zoom. We use mural.co, which is some of you may know it, some of you may not. There's some other things that are like it. it allows for simultaneous collaboration by the different people on that mural. They use the mural metaphor. It's really sort of a page that in theory might represent a wall. And the main thing you're doing, at least in the course, is using stickies. There's some other things, but mainly it's the so-called post-it note idea. And I think they've implemented it quite well. You may find it very useful to steal that idea and have your team work in the murals. Once you see it and experience it, you may like it a lot. There's some other tools that are very similar. Miro is supposed to be very similar. A lot of people like that one. But for whatever reason, we like Mural and we use that, and we'll teach you that a little bit. I mean, both ahead of time a little bit and also just in the course of doing the course, as we do the course. And we'll also do in the course online, we'll draw during the course pictures and notes, and then we'll send that to you as a PDF. And I do that using the paper app and an iPad Pro and an Apple Pencil some people are interested to know that. Okay. So those are the quick things I wanted to say. I hope that covers a lot of your questions, but I'm assuming some of you will have questions. Happy to do that. Tell me what you got. And turn yourself off of mute, Angel.
I have
Yes,
a
Kristin.
few questions.
Please.
Hi, so I'm Kristin.
Yes.
I'm actually currently a technical Scrum Master. I work closely with Brian Adams, and he suggested.
Oh yes, I know Brian from for years now.
Yeah, he talks a lot about you very highly.
Oh, well, thank you.
So,
Thank him.
yeah, so he suggested this course, and so one of my question is, we take courses with you and then we do our certification online with Scrum Alliance, or
Correct.
you provide, okay.
So I have to upload your names to Scrum Alliance, and then they send you an email. And then once you have that email, then you can log in through your Scrum Alliance account and then take the course online, take the test online.
Okay.
So that's how it links up.
Okay. I too have a MBA, but I've been a Scrum Master for over a year now. So I wanted to ask you how you thought having an MBA helps with the Scrum framework.
Okay. So I think it gives you a broader sense of what it's all about. So from the company's point of view, and even from the customer's point of view, we don't do Scrum they don't care about waterfall. We don't do Scrum not to be waterfall. I mean, Scrum and Agile were initially a reaction to waterfall. We dislike waterfall, so we want to do Scrum, Agile and Scrum. The customers and the more senior managers, I mean, sometimes they study it and they kind of agree, but they don't really care. That's not relevant. What's relevant is, are our employees happier? Are they going to stay with us? Are they building better stuff? Is it more innovative? Are they building it quicker? Are the customers becoming a lot more satisfied with what we're building, whether the customers are internal or external? And to me, those attitudes are key attitudes that an MBA would understand. I think an MBA would tend to have more balance between, yes, we want the people, the workers, to have a good process and to be happy with their work and so forth. But we also want it to work for everybody else, for the managers, for the business, for the customers. It's got to work for really everybody. And so you naturally, I think you're more naturally going to see that if you're an MBA. It's because you've studied all those different sides, right? So I think it's as straightforward as that. Now, another thing to say is, by comparison, a lot of the folks that are trainers are former coders. It's the more common thing. Some of them are former.
So that's where I came from.
Yeah, exactly. So, but they haven't done an MBA thing, right? And they've never really been a manager, not a normal manager at least. So when you ask them to talk about the product owner, they don't tend to have a lot of sympathy. They don't understand the business side. They haven't worked over there, and they haven't even thought about it much. They haven't had all the MBA training about it. So they tend to be, I think, weaker in terms of explaining the product owner role and how it needs to be integral with the team, not a sort of separate thing over here, which is what many of them still want it to be, kind of. Not all of them, but many.
Right.
But more integral. And I think if you're at least my idea is it should be integral. And I think that's partly because I come from an MBA background.
Yes, and I actually do completely agree with that, because when I started as a developer, I had my MBA already, so it was easy, not easier, but That's why they asked me to transition into the technical SM role, because I was able to balance the tech side and the business side,
Yes.
especially with the project. So yes, I do understand that, but sorry, 2 more questions.
Okay. Is that okay, Angel?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll
Okay.
go quick. Do we go over Gherkin at all?
Gherkin, we did not go over Gherkin.
No, will we in the course?
Oh, will we? I don't get into tools.
Okay.
We've got a lot to go over, and the problem is, I guess in theory you could, but it really needs you to be fair. You want everybody using the same tool set, and the problem is they never are. Well, I can't say that I've actually done a survey every time to prove that, but in general, they're not using the same tool set. So therefore, I feel, I sometimes go into it a little bit, but if I go very far, I feel like, there's half the room is going like, I don't care. This is not my tool.
Yeah.
So anyway, we don't. There's a lot to cover separate from that. So so we could talk about it some later, but we're not trying to do it in the class, basically.
Okay.
You had another question?
One more. Yes.
Yes.
So you had mentioned in one of your slides, you used the term events. So I guess in Scrum, do we not use ceremonies, or is that specifically for
so people do call them ceremonies. I don't care whether you call them a meeting or an event or a ceremony. That doesn't bother me too much. I would say, I'll just give you my bias, which is that ceremony is more formal than I want to be. So I used to have to wear a coat and tie all the time. So I'm not that informal. I don't have a T-shirt that's all ripped up and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But so my bias though with Scrum is to be less formal. So I would prefer meeting or event, but that's a minor point. It's the same thing. The same for you call them ceremonies or events or meetings. So that's a minor difference. No, they're not using the word roles in the new Scrum guide. You made me think of that. But that's about the roles. That's not about the meetings, ceremonies, events, whatever you want to call them.
Okay.
Okay. Angel, I'm guessing you have a question.
Yes. Well, my question is that I've been around, I'm actually a senior exec. So I've been around a lot of projects at different levels of the organization. Yes. And they range from hundred thousands to millions and millions of dollars.
Yes.
And one of the things that I'm finding that we've actually deployed Scrum in our organization, but it seems that a lot of the Scrum projects end up kind of, they start to struggle, because I think that one of the things is missing is the education for the business and the execs as far as how to integrate Scrum into a project. And so what we find out is that most of the projects end up going into what I call a hybrid type of mode. Mm-hmm. Where a mixture of the waterfall and a mixture of some of the Scrum for the iteration process. So, it's a hard transition in the state government, because a lot of projects have been under scrutiny for televised as far as failing because of, the waterfall method, and some because of the Scrum. So what is your take on that? Because I see a lot of people coming out of these classes and not really proficient in running projects.
Yep. Okay, so let me say a couple of things. So the first thing I'd say is that Scrum seems really, really simple, and you can kind of explain it in 2 days, but I think it's actually a lot more complex, and it needs more, it needs education than re-education. So almost always one of the first things I say, a little bit related to that, is, "Hi, I'm Joe. I'm a recovering waterfallic." Which is to say that without our even knowing about it, we tend to go back to the waterfall ideas that are not really, at least the ones I'm thinking of, are not really helpful. So that's at least one thing. Getting them to really get on board with Agile fully takes time, and a restatement of the ideas, and often, a lot of companies don't put enough into it to get them to really understand it. Okay, so that's one statement. Another statement is Scrum is purposefully incomplete. You have to add additional things to Scrum. So one of the things I'm adding immediately is the Agile release planning stuff, which I think gives it a lot more structure for people, so that managers and business side people can see how are these stories going to get done, so that we end up getting our, the overall thing completed by this date. And those initial plans may or may not be that accurate the very first time, but over time, and with improvement and learning and fine tuning, those plans start to be pretty good. And it gives everybody, the team and the people outside the team, a structure for talking about, how is this going? Are we really going to accomplish the overall goal from, you might say, a customer point of view or a business side point of view? So I think that structure is very helpful to pretty much everybody. Maybe some teams don't need it. I mean, I hear people say, I've got a team, they can build stuff without doing any of that planning stuff. And I go like, okay, I guess that could be true because you really seem convinced so. But I think in the real world, most people need I'll call it a planning framework. So that's one piece of it. Now, I do think people, depending on the situation, have to add other things. It sounds like you're working with some really big projects. So sometimes you're working with multiple teams working together on the same project or effort. And then you've got to bring in what we call scaling. So sometimes in the CSM courses, I'll talk about scaling a little bit. To me, scaling is a big subject and usually pretty complex. So you've heard of, I'm assuming, Angel, you must have heard of SAFe, right? You've probably heard of LESS. You've probably heard of Scrum at Scale, those kinds of things. So I'm not doctrinaire about those things. My point of view is every situation is different. Let's see where you are, see how many good things and how much of a mess you made, so to speak. Because usually people have done both good things and bad things in these areas. And then see what are the biggest pain points. And then let's do a workshop with the right people, not one person, but the right people, and get them to have consensus about what's working, what's not working, and what we want to change. And then we get they have consensus and buy-in. And then they go for the next 6 months and try to implement those changes and make that scaling work for however many teams they're working with, make that new scaling approach work for them. So I like to approach scaling as a separate scaling workshop for 1 or 2 days. I do talk about it. I don't always, but I do often talk about it in the CSM course a little bit, but it's not enough time. It just gives them a flavor, an introduction to the idea of scaling. And then I much prefer to do it as a scaling workshop and take the group of people or that situation, that department, whatever it may be, as it is, and let them tell me what they think is, what they currently are doing and what they think is working well and what's not working well. And then what they think will be the improvements. And I'm making suggestions, and maybe I'll bring in another coach and make additional suggestions. And then we try to put together a plan to make that happen in the next 6 months. And as soon as I say I want all these changes done in 6 months, then all of a sudden they make it a lot simpler because they realize I can't change that much in 6 months. And then they start to prioritize. What are we really going to change in 6 months? Which I hope, and I probably should do more follow-ups, but I hope makes them more realistic and therefore more successful in making those changes happen. Anyway, does that help a little bit? You raise a big question. We could talk about it. I'm sorry, you're on mute.
Yes, I've actually, I've come across a lot of what you just mentioned there, and I still see seems to be a gap between the business, the sponsors of the project, the teams, as far as getting to that level that you just described. It takes a long time. It takes a shift of mindset, how to think on things. And when you get into very impatient executive sponsors and business folks, that you go in there with a like a one-sheeter for a project charter and describing it's an iterative process, you see a lot of them kind of frustrated in a way that I'm paying all this money for this. They're looking for substance, and so it's a learning curve for them, and that's the kind of challenges we're facing here. So oftentimes we bring people in, and it seems that when we do the hybrid approach, we seem to be more of a more successful, and bringing in someone who has understands like the PMI version of project management, and utilizing that skill set within Agile to kind of help them with the, adjusting to that environment and how that culture is working to make sure that project is going in the right direction for the stakeholders. Yes,
that makes sense. I mentioned this scaling workshop, and I'm going to do another session like this for a half an hour talking about that. It's on the list. It's in a few weeks. I'm not sure. It may be next week or the week after. And I'm going to come back and do those. If that date doesn't suit you, or if you really want to do it at a different time with several other people, I can do that also.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's if you want to talk about that more. You do make me think that scaling is a big topic, and I should have a separate sort of webinar just not talking about a scaling workshop, but talking about scaling.
I agree.
So yeah, that's very. If you're with Brian, I think I know where you're coming from, and that makes sense, Kristin, that you would be interested as well. And I've done that in the past. I'm sorry.
I see a lot. I've actually went off to take courses in the PMI ACP, and
yes.
I find that one having more depth of knowledge, covering a lot of the areas in Scrum. What's your take compared to this 2-day workshop?
Yeah. So I think the ACP is more advanced than the CSM.
Okay.
I think the ACP compares either more to the ACSM or the CSP in Scrum Alliance. I have to say I feel like the ACP is not as agile as the ACP books and so forth, or not as agile as they might be, but they've come. I mean, the PMI has come a long way in terms of being of understanding agile and so forth. I don't know. That's my basic idea that people can learn that, and that would if you get some ACP people in there and you get some CSPs. The certified Scrum professionals in a group, and then have them work on your problems. I think the different points of view could lead to a very good solution. So that'd be kind of my recommendation. Get several different coaches, give them time to understand your specific situation, and then let them work with you to improve things over time. I don't know if you see me dialing it up, so to speak.
No, I see what you're saying, but remember, just as you mentioned earlier, the certified Scrum Master is more like a facilitator versus really command and control like a project manager.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
So different role between the two.
Yes. But having a project manager outside of a team and maybe helping several teams work together, I could see that happening, or at least that person would be very good as a kind of a outside manager helping the scaled group work together, or help the group work with other parts of the organization. We often need managers for that, particularly, and we don't talk about that enough. And I try to talk about the managers in the CSM course. Arguably I should talk about it more. But anyway, let me just see if anybody you have R on your box, and we started talking a little bit earlier. Did you have a question? The lady from Poland?
No, I don't have any question.
Okay, just wanted to be able to answer your questions if you had them. And then Yvonne, I can't see you, but did you have any questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you so much for asking.
Okay.
I have another one.
Okay, please, Kristin.
Sorry. Okay. So with Scrum, I know where I'm currently at in Charlotte. I don't plan to stay here forever. So my question is, if I were to maybe move somewhere else, like for my certification, where is most practice? Like what route? For example, like SAFe. Would it be best to get a SAFe certification, or what type of?
I think I would definitely get a CSM.
Okay.
Then after that, I would think of other things. And so if you're really going to be in a scaled environment often, particularly if the organizations, not every organization does SAFe. Some organizations hate SAFe, some people love SAFe. And then there's organizations in the middle that don't particularly love it or hate it, but they at least have some respect for the certification and the experience.
SAFe is not necessarily safe.
So I'm not sure. Well, it's not a guarantee.
Right.
That now, if you have certain organizations you think you're going to move to, then we could talk, or you can ask and find out, do they do a lot of SAFe right now?
Right.
Now, be aware that sometimes they do SAFe for a couple of years, and then they start to not be happy with it for good or bad reasons. And then, you're trying to move 2 years later, and then they're no longer doing SAFe. So that's happened in the past. But anyway, so you can make a decision kind of that way, I think.
Okay.
I would get a CSM first. Then the next question becomes, like Angel was saying, do you go after I'm not sure if an ACP is of interest to you, or are you a PMP already?
No, I'm not.
Okay. So if you were a PMP, then it's likely you would start to be interested in the ACP. That's a common association that people have. So once you have the CSM, then I would say, well, do you want to think about the CSP and Scrum Alliance, or do you want to think about the ACP? Or do you want to think about something else in SAFE or a Scrum at Scale certification or whatever, these other things? There's some others out there.
I guess it depends where I'm going to go. But right now, my organization was thinking about merging to SAFE. But I think if I just get my CSM and then maybe I saw an option for advanced CSM, I could do that.
Yes. But if they're going to do SAFE shortly, then maybe getting a SAFE certification so that you understand the lingo as they start to adopt it, that will be helpful to you if they're about to do it.
Okay.
So and if you want to, we can talk about that more offline.
Sure.
Or at a well, it's not that easy. We used to do we had been doing in-person Agile Carolinas meetings.
Okay.
So we're going to do an Agile Carolinas meeting next week that all of you are welcome to come to online. But it won't be easy for you and I to just sort of talk informally in the online situation. That's kind of awkward. Whereas in person, it's kind of easy. There's
Right.
there's a little bit of time before, a little bit of time after, whatever. We could do that. So if you'd like to talk, just send me a note and we'll take 5 minutes and talk a little bit more about some of these other things. Okay. Any other questions about the CSM or the ARP, Agile Release Planning Workshop? We're good. Okay, I'm sorry, Angel, but you're on mute.
I just wanted to mention to Kristin that there's a lot of different areas in SAFE that she can go into. There's a bunch, it's not just one. There's a lot of different certifications that are tailored to, maybe the direction you're trying to go to. So that's something that it's a big hype right now. There's a lot of organizations using it. So it's something to look into. A lot of them are using it for enterprise architecture. I'm also an instructor through the Open Group Certified Enterprise Architecture Framework. And I've been certified as a PMP for like 20 years. So, the track that he's saying, the Certified Scrum Master will give you a lot more traction, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, tell me if you think this, but my understanding is the most common certification in SAFE is the so-called SPC. I think it's Certified Practitioner or SAFE Practitioner Certification, SPC. So I think that's the first thing that most people get. Does that sound right to you still, Angel? In the SAFE framework?
You guys, we're disconnected. We're losing bad connection.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So, but anyway, I'm pretty sure that's correct, the SPC. But there, as Angel was saying, there's a bunch of other certifications in the SAFE, whatever. You can go to scaledagileFramework.com and see all the different certifications. There's a bunch of them in different roles. But I'm not sure that you're quite there yet.
Right.
To make, in terms of your journey, Kristin, to make a decision which one you want to go into, at least from what you've told me so far. So maybe SPC, if you're going to do, SAFE pretty soon, I still think I would go CSM first, but if you're going to go SAFE pretty soon, then I would do the SPC from what I know, and then consider other ones at a later date, maybe.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, very good. Well, good to talk to you all. I'll be doing this every so often. If you have additional questions, send me an email or, we can get together and talk for 5 minutes. That'd be fine too. But anyway, enjoyed it. I'll be posting what do I want to say? The slide deck, and we'll be doing, and also the video. So if you want to see some of this stuff later, you'll be able to see it that way. Anyway, enjoy it. Thanks very much.
Posting schedule of your courses and to sign up.
Yes, that's on my website. I gave you the link in the slide deck.
Okay.
But you'll find it easily. Just go to leanagiletraining.com, www.leanagiletraining.com, and then all the extreme left-hand side, you'll see, you click on that, and then next thing, and then boom, you're right there in the whole list.
Okay.
All the way into February or something like that. Okay, thanks very much. Have a good day. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.